This time on True Blue Touring, the 55 gets a lick of paint. Before paint, we had to prepare the body. We had already cut out all the rust and made patches, but these areas and a few other dents needed panel beating and bogging. This was not an area of expertise at True Blue Touring. You can see from our made up techniques that we don't really know what we're doing. This was until we met Damo. Damo first came over to help with the roof, which had been hit by a tree at some point and had a huge dent. On top of this, I'd put way too much heat in the metal when welding the roof patches, causing the bubble-shaped roof to warp. Damo spent the better part of a day with a slapstick beating the roof back into shape. The other thing that Damo recommended was a decision to take the whole thing back to bare metal. I wish I made this call from the start, as it would have saved me a ton of sanding and wire wheeling, but the scope of the project was much smaller back then. The paint stripper was quite satisfying to watch as it bubbled up the old paint. It usually took 2 goes of stripper and then a light wire wheel to clean the metal. We would then coat it in WD-40 to prevent surface rust. The next thing Damo helped us with was bogging the roof. He got us onto the better quality Evercoat Rage Ultra Bog and the metal applicator cards. The roof ended up with almost a whole tin of bog, but because it was such a big surface area, it only ended up being a few millimeters thick. Damo helped to apply it out with the Mega Applicator card and then sent me to the tool shop to buy a new sander. Once the bog went off, he taught me how to use the new tool and rip into the bog with 40 grit paper, getting the roof much straighter. Then it was out with the long DuraBlock to block it by hand with 120 grit, and a few more coats of bog where it was pretty low. We got it pretty good. While it looked like a lot of bog, because it's such a large area and there was so much sanding, the final layer of the roof actually ended up quite thin. The other area with decent panel damage was above the passenger taillight. In the earlier stages, we made some custom tools to get in there and beat it a bit straighter, but this caused the metal to stretch. Damo showed us how to shrink it with the oxy and a wet towel, which got this area much nicer too. It was at this point we made the call to remove the body from the chassis. We sent the chassis and diffs off to get sandblasted and painted, and we made a ghetto rotisserie with some big bits of timber bolted to the body mounts and the seatbelt bolts. We then got a group of mates to lift the body off the chassis and flip it on its side. This gave us good access to the underside, which needed some TLC. We hit it with the wire wheels to get all the dirt and the old sound deadener off, taking it back to mostly bare metal too. This unfortunately revealed a few more rust spots that had to be repaired in the body mounts. Luckily they weren't too complex. Next, we coated the whole underside with metal conditioner, which is a rust treatment. You can see how it reacts with the oxidized metal. This is then washed off with warm water and dried immediately with air and towels. The surface then gets rubbed with red Scotch-Brite to ensure the primer has a good surface to bond to. Using brushes and rollers, we applied the primer nicely to the whole underside. Again, really satisfying to see it come through together in one colour. Next, we carefully applied seam seal in all the different joins of the panels on the underside. Finally, it was all hands on deck to apply the underbody sound deadener. We got the call that the chassis and diffs were ready for collection, so we quickly got them all back from the blasters. Really satisfying to see some nice shiny parts. The diffs were quickly assembled after being fully reconditioned with solid pinion spacers, new bearings, brakes, and some suspension to hold it all together. The body was then flipped back over and lifted up onto the chassis. Then, section by section, the body was given the same rust treatment as the underside and painted with primer. There were a few more areas to bog up around the body as well. This was all done during this process. We then had the body to a nice point where it was all straight and sitting in primer on the chassis. For the panels, we decided to send them to get sandblasted and primed. We then fitted them up to the car and gapped them up nicely, as this was the last chance to make any major modifications before paint. The sandblasting revealed a few extra rust spots, which I cut out and made some more patches for. At this point in the project, the panel beating work was all getting a bit much for me, and I'll admit that I outsourced a bunch of the bog work to Damo on the panels, which he did a great job of and kept the progress going on the project, which had just hit the 3.5-year mark and started to stall a little bit. We loaded the car on the trailer and stacked all the panels on the back of the 40 and took them up for the final prep and paint. Because of the height of the car on the trailer, we had to unload the car in another car park and then lower it down the hill on a snatch strap, a bit of a hairy moment for us all. The colour I decided to go with was the classic blue and white two-tone, a factory colour which was a little less common in Australia. The guys did an unreal job, first seam sealing everything and then painting the inside the nice creamy white. Then Damo and I came in to fit up the doors and guards and do the final gap up plus positioning of the hinges. Next, the whole exterior was painted with a 2K high field primer, which was then blocked and reapplied twice to get everything gun barrel straight. Then the entire car and panels were all painted fully in white, before finally adding the blue, which made it look amazing. Everything was then carefully transported back home, and it was time for the stressful yet satisfying job of removing the masking tape to reveal the beautiful shiny panels. Super excited by the result and progress. Next video will be the final video in the restoration series, where we assemble all these nice shiny parts.